Since tales were first told, stories of duels and battle have been some of the most enduring. It's where complex conflicts boil down to a simple who wins, who loses, and the tension of that question is at the foundation of whole genres. And yet, skipping or skimming fight scenes is a more common practice than you might think. Especially in written fiction, which is our main focus today, fight scenes run the risk of losing the reader. So how do you avoid that? That's the question I hope to answer today. How can you write a fight scene that no one would ever skip? One so thrilling, they might instead remember it for the rest of their lives. Researching why people skip fight scenes, you'll find some reoccurring complaints. From those, I've made a list of 8 things that often go wrong, and we'll go through them one by one to see how those problems can be turned to your advantage. Problem 1. It feels separate from the story. One central reason people skip fights is that the story is put on hold and stands still until the end of the scene. This works in a video game because you're facing the challenge yourself, but that's not the case in novels and film. So if the script just says, they fight, who could blame you for going to make a sandwich and then popping in to see who won? So how can we make the fight feel like it's part of the story, not apart from it? By revealing who your characters are through their actions. A tense moment of physical conflict is likely to show you a lot. Your characters can even find out things they didn't know about themselves. Sure, you can do big dramatic reveals, but there are subtle ways to think about this.
That's impossible!
No, Luke, it's very possible, like in this fight, which tells us so much about Will and Jack. Details are given in dialogue.
Who makes all these?
I do.
But there's more important stuff revealed. Things they don't need to say out loud because they show you. Like the fact that Jack will trick his way out of any situation, and that Will does what he thinks is right, even when he has to pay a massive price. Reality Punch Studios made a detailed breakdown of this fight, which I suggest watching, although you probably already have, you bastard! Who wins the fight is important, sure, but it's how you beat your opponent, or not, that reflects your personality and development. Like Marie Brennan says,
what I think a fight can do for a story is it can either reveal or confirm or change something profound about one or more of the characters who are involved.
This actually gives us the bones of a story. Reveal who your character is in a first fight, confirm who they are in a second, and show their change in a third.
No fair.
If you integrate your fight scenes in such a way, they become essential and pivotal to the story, rather than separate. Problem 2. I can't follow what's happening. Being able to follow the action is hugely important, otherwise your fight will just be a big mess. It's hard to care and keep caring when you're being assaulted with something unintelligible. The solution is not to go into massive detail on what's happening. In fact, that's likely to make things more convoluted, but rather I'd suggest paying attention to the setting. Bring the setting to life. Unless it's pistols at dawn in the desert, or a never-ending tournament for that matter, the space will have a huge impact on how your characters achieve their goals. For this reason, you should probably make a map of the location to keep track for yourself. You don't need to explain every inch to the reader, but you need to establish the space. Show the location before the fight, because during the fight, there won't be time. There are many good things to be said about this iconic fight from The Princess Bride, but let's look just at the setting. In the book, Inigo takes a moment, a single paragraph, to survey the battleground. There's the trees, with roots to trip on, the boulders you can leap off, and the cliff, which is especially well established as a danger due to the long climb. When the fight starts, it moves between the trees, the boulders, the cliffside, showing the fighter's strengths and weaknesses in different areas. And it's easy to understand that whoever gets pushed closer to the cliff is at a disadvantage. A fight can also reveal new things about the setting. Are bystanders egging the fight on? Or shutting their windows and staying indoors? Are they ignoring it, taken aback and unsure? Or are they rushing in to pull the combatants apart? It's all very well to say, yes, folks around here hate violence, but it's only when a fight breaks out that you see if that means people run away from violence or towards it. And that's likely to stick in your reader's mind much longer. Problem 3. The action is boring. It doesn't really matter how good your setting is if the action starts and it's all kick, punch, kick, punch, kick, punch. The fight feels static if it lacks a distinct push and pull of will, because the word scene is more important than the word fight. Make it a problem-solving scene. First, make sure it's clear what problem the main character wants to solve and why. Here's some simple potential problems. I want to get past you to save someone. I want to defeat you to prove something to myself. You have a thing I need? And the ever-classic, I don't actually want to fight you.
I don't want trouble.
Within the scene, have your characters try and fail to achieve their goal several times. Make them pay a price for each failure and escalate the conflict. Get inside your character's head and show what's happening there as they get closer or further away from their goal. Super Eyepatch Wolf has an interesting video on this. Comparing a fight to a game of chess, Super Eyepatch Wolf divides the writing into a technical narrative, everything on the chessboard, and an emotional narrative, everything in the players' heads, including what brought them there and what victory or defeat would mean for each one. Both of these narratives need to come together and work in unison. And when they do, your readers are not going to zone out, because there's an engaging dialogue going on, even if words aren't spoken. Problem 4. Too many details. If you dive too deep into combat technique, you might achieve a very niche appeal while leaving the rest of your potential readers confused or bored. Your job is not to reproduce the fight in every intricate detail, it is to capture and convey the feeling of the fight. And the best way of doing that is to let the reader work for you. Let the reader choreograph the action. Without your reader, your story is just scribbles on a page. They are the ones who bring those scribbles to life, and they come willing to do so. All they need are some cues to get them started. That's why you don't give every detail in any situation. You leave things to the reader's imagination, and this works especially well in fight scenes. Author Sebastian de Castel says, "Show them early on in the fight how each weapon moves through space. Make that vivid and visceral. The reader will then be able to fill in the action while you describe what your characters are saying, what they are thinking, and what's showing on their faces. In other words, help the reader to choreograph the fight so that you can spend your time on the drama." I think this is great advice. Go visceral at first, set the tone, then feel free to abstract out and let the reader take the reins. Here's an example from The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle. It's his version of the fight between Little John and Robin Hood on a log of wood over the water. There's details that put you in the moment and abstract sections that let you fill in a lot of blanks. Note that the actual fight is less than a paragraph, and that doesn't make it any less memorable. Problem 5. Visual fights are more exciting. I've been showing you some text, and in the editing I am tempted to plug in the film versions instead. We are a visual generation, I mean, you're watching a video about writing instead of, reading it. And when we get all our storytelling training from films and TV, it's going to slightly mess up the way we write. There's nothing wrong with studying and working in different mediums, but be aware of the strengths of each one, and don't play to the strengths of film if you're writing a novel, because prose has distinct advantages of its own. Use all your senses. Almost every fight scene describes the visuals, and sounds like dialogue and the crunch of breaking bone. But seeing someone get pummeled is different from feeling it. What is the touch of the asphalt like when your nails scrape over it as you claw to get away? What about the stench of manure from the nearby stables? Or your opponent's cigarette smoke tickling its way up your nose? Taste can easily get cliché. How often have you read that someone tasted blood in their mouth? Hey, I've written that too, we probably all have, but how about tasting the mud as you're pushed down? Tasting the slick sweat as you bite into your opponent's hand in one last desperate attempt to escape? Films are limited to visuals and sounds, so you actually have an advantage, because your only limit is the reader's imagination. And by the way, this also means you have an unlimited special effects budget. Problem 6. This feels unrealistic. This isn't a scientific report, and this isn't a documentary. They are roller coasters that don't aim to reproduce reality with perfect accuracy. So your story doesn't need to be real, but it does need to feel real. And that might be doubly true for fight scenes. If we don't believe there's any danger, then it takes the air out of it. Introduce elements of realism. Here are some things that might annoy martial artists who read your story, as told by Wesley Chu, author, former stuntman, and martial artist. 1. Fight scenes don't last forever. Real fights are fast and brutal. 2. Weapons aren't that light. Unless you're fencing, you're going to want to use your whole body. 3. Training takes time. As Wesley said, during his first 2 weeks of martial arts training, he just got to walk in a circle. The next 2 weeks, he walked the other way, because it's all about building from the ground up, and that takes a lot more time than we think. Then there's recovery time. If you've ever had an injury, sure, the pain sticks in your mind, but the reason we end up frustrated afterwards is the slow, grueling recovery. Yes, in an action story, this might be better off ignored after a quick improvised bandages scene, but in many cases, it can be a missed opportunity. No one would accuse A Song of Ice and Fire of being completely realistic, and the TV adaptation even less so, but having a character perish unexpectedly from an infection, or brought down not by his mighty opponent, but by a spear to the back, it gives you a certain degree of credibility. Sometimes you do want things to be larger than life, but sprinkling in some of these elements can make the conflict more tense, more dangerous, and more interesting. Problem 7. There's no reason for this fight. Sometimes characters clash for flimsy reasons because wouldn't it be cool if they did?
This is idiotic.
Whenever character motivation bends in unnatural ways to build a situation, it's going to feel wrong. But that's not going to happen if you root the conflict in who the characters actually are, and if you show what they want before they even lay eyes on each other. Build tension before the fight. It's like the old Hitchcock bomb thing, where if you let the viewer know that there's a bomb under the table, they're going to be on the edge of their seat, even if the characters don't know. The bomb equivalent here is to let the reader know a fantastic fight is coming. That will get them turning the page. And you don't need to hammer this home because the reader is smart. If you show a badass fighter who wants something that's completely the opposite of what your protagonist wants, that alone will get us imagining and anticipating what will happen when those two forces come into conflict, and it's all rooted in believing in the wants and needs of those characters.
What about what I want? Justice.
If we are already excited before the fight starts, the fight itself doesn't need to be drawn out. Which brings us to problem 8. It's just too long. As mentioned, one element of realistic fighting is brevity. Fights often end fast. So if all else fails, make your fights shorter. It won't make them any less tense, not if they have proper build-up, and no one has ever skipped a fight scene because it's too short. But the solution isn't to make it one sentence either, so where do you draw the line? Keep it focused. In a fight, your characters will be more focused than usual. Your writing should reflect that, with short, snappy sentences. Instead of, they pulled at one another, each trying to get the upper hand, you can simply write, they grappled. Online you'll find lists of forceful sounding words, and I'm by no means saying you should stuff all these in, but they're good ingredients for concrete sentences, and if you build a scene out of sentences like that, you're well on your way. We started with 8 problems, and now we have 8 opportunities. Do you need to hit all of these in every single fight scene? No. But if the fight doesn't reveal anything new, maybe you should make an extra effort to keep it focused and brief. If the fight doesn't have any realistic elements, highlight how the characters strive towards their goals, because if the conflict works, we'll suspend a lot of disbelief. As always, you're not going to write anything perfect in a first draft. I'd advise flailing at the topic as much as possible. If you're uncertain, write a lot of fight scenes. Pick one of these tips and really focus on nailing that aspect, because if you really want something, you need to fight for it. So pick up your pen and start the battle. What's your favorite fight scene of all time? Let me know in the comments. And if you found any of these tips useful, consider subscribing, as I have more videos on writing coming up. My name is Jacob Burrows, my website is awesomepedia.org. Thank you for watching.